So we've still got a flurry of people joining us, but given the amount we're trying to cover in today's session, I think we might get started if that's okay with everyone. So thank you for joining us, everyone who's managed to get online already. Fantastic to have you here. I just kick off by introducing myself. I'm the Chief Executive of the Sachs Institute, Martin McNamara, and I'll kick us off also with an acknowledgement of country. So of course, we're all joining from different parts of the country today, but I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on today. For me, it's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and also pay particular acknowledgement to any Indigenous people that are joining us today. I also just like to note that we are recording this session, and we're hoping to use some of the insights that we learned from this session as part of some further work we'll do in the future, I'm sure. So it's really valuable for us to pick up the conversation and the sort of feedback we get today. So just letting you know about all of that. You're welcome to have your camera on or off, but all the microphones will be muted. You should see at the top part of your Teams application window the Q&A function. It might look a bit different to the standard Teams that you're used to joining in on, but there should be I think at the top right-hand corner of your screen, you should see Q&A. And we are hoping to have a discussion, particularly at the end of today, where we really want to pose some questions to the broader group. What's important to you looking into the future? And we'd be encouraging you to put forward your perspectives, your suggestions by pressing on that QA part of your application and entering in some comments. We are hoping to pick up some of those comments in the discussion today, but of course we won't be able to pick up every one of those. So we'll be able to feed them into the future planning work that we're doing at the moment as part of the future of SURE. So that's all I really want to say about housekeeping. I think we do have quite a lot of scheduled presentations today, which are really keen to share with you. And I think there's a general reason that we thought it was a good time to do that. And Matt Gorringe, who's the director of SURE, will talk to some of this in his presentation. But SURE is substantially different to how it was a few years ago, and it's substantially different on a number of dimensions. The sorts of functionality that SURE has, its performance, but also the types of uses that SURE is being applied towards. And I think it is really important to bring everyone up to speed with that, but also to continue the conversation about what the future of SURE looks like, so that we can continue to be a really valuable contributor to the research effort across the country. And there's some great examples to share with you today about work that's going on in partnerships with data custodians and also researchers. So great food for thought about how the future might look for SURE. But I'll start by introducing Merryn Smith, who's the first speaker that will talk to us today. And many of you would know Merryn. She's got an extensive background in health and research. She was responsible in the WA Department of Health for the Health Information Centre for over 10 years. And you might be aware that Merryn's also the inaugural Chief Executive of the Population Health Research Network, which has been so important to the population health research infrastructure across the country for probably more than 10 years now. I think Merryn closing in on 15 years perhaps. So fantastic to have Merryn talking to us today. And I'll hand over to you, Merryn, for the first presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, Martin. And let me just share my screen. Okay, so can you see that?
Yep, that's up and running, Merryn.
Excellent. Okay, well, I'm going to say a few words to you today around SURE's role in health research using linked data. Let me just move that on. Now I've got a problem. Okay, so I'm going to start by saying congratulations to the SURE 2.0 team. It's been a great project, and PHRN is very proud to have funded this important research. So I'm not sure if everyone in the audience knows about PHRN, but we're a national research infrastructure. We've got core funding from the Australian Government's National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy, which is a bit of a mouthful. It's NCRIS for short. And our focus is on the linkage of health and other human services data at the person level and support for secure access to the data. We fund 6 state territory data linkage units, a national linkage unit, an online application system, and of course the Shore Secure Access environment. We're also part of the NCRIS Health Group, which is a collaboration with 4 other NCRIS infrastructures, and we aim to deliver a better access to health research infrastructure. And we're doing that in a range of ways, but that includes support for researchers who are applying for the MRFF funding. And so there's opportunities to leverage a range of national research infrastructure and build that in to any funding proposals. So we've got PHRN is led from a program office based at the University of Western Australia in Perth, and we have facilities in every state and territory. We have partnerships with every health department or every state health department, with the Commonwealth through the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, and of course with the Sax Institute for sure. And what about Australia's linked data? Well, all Australian jurisdictions now have at least 10 years of their core health data linked, and that includes births, deaths, hospitalisations, cancer, and prescriptions data. There's also good progress with routine linkage of Commonwealth, state and territory health data, because as you probably know, about half of the health data in Australia is held by the Commonwealth and the other is held by the states and territories. And to really understand what's going on with health in Australia, we need to be able to link that data. There's also some national linked data assets that have been built and more are planned. So the NECI data, some of you are familiar with that, and I think Fleur's going to say a little bit more about that a bit later in this symposium. And of course, there are billions of health records in the linkage systems across the country, and these need to be handled in ways that are lawful, ethical, and acceptable to the community. So what's Shore's role in all of this? Well, Shore plays a vital role in the management of Australia's linked health data. It was established in 2009 as part of the initial PHRN investment. So I think, as you were saying, Martin, Shore's been on a journey and it's now a relatively mature infrastructure, but also a forward-looking one. And PHRN's continued to provide funding support to the Shore since it was started. So custodians place linked data in the Shore environment and it can be safely accessed then by authorised users. And I think a key thing about Shore is that it's a trusted environment and that provides assurance to data subjects, data suppliers, and of course data users. There are lots of safeguards in Shore. There's strong cybersecurity, there's training so users understand their obligations. There's authentication of the users before they can actually access the data, and data outputs are checked before they leave the Shore environment. And many data custodians now require their linked data to be accessed via a secure environment. When we started in 2009, there really weren't secure environments, or just some, not a lot, that were available for the various jurisdictions and the various researchers. But now there's more, and they're enormously important. So just to say something about that importance, Shore was one of the first secure research environments in the country. And while new environments have been established, these often service a particular jurisdiction or an organisation. And Shore provides a service for users irrespective of their location or their organisation. And we think that's a great strength. Other benefits within Shore include a choice of software and compute environment, non-user costs, and also custodian and user trust. And as you would imagine, PHRN keeps metrics on the various services that we fund, and the Shore usage has been really growing steadily and is continuing to grow. There's growth in users, in the workspaces that are created within the Shore environment, and also the terabytes used, so the size. So all of those are growing, and I think that sort of highlights the importance and the demand for Shore. The impact. So I think there's been a very important impact over the years, particularly in terms of actually health research and also around data management. So, of course, there are major cohorts in SURE. So, the 45 and up would be one that probably known to most of you, but others as well. And there are numerous complex research projects. From a data perspective, there are also custodian controlled data repositories. So some of you might have used the Domino data that's in SURE, that's Centrelink data. One of the jurisdictions, so South Australia, is actually managing its custodian controlled data through SURE. And of course, there are national registries. So Martin said in his introduction about the importance of looking forward, and I've included just a couple of points about health research futures. So looking forward, I think it's we can say with confidence that linked data will remain a vital component of Australia's health research environment. I think there'll be a greater complexity with linked data going forward. I think there'll be more clinical data, more omics data, and more imaging data. And in fact, one of the things that the health group's trying to do is have a pipeline, a more organised pipeline from the molecular data right through to the population data. And some of you will know and may have used data from the New South Wales Biobank. So that's a recently established biobank. And that biobank data is now routinely linked to the New South Wales population data. And I think that's a sign of things to come. We also think there'll be new users. We already have clinician users, but we think that will grow. And we think there will also be greater use by industry, possibly not of the unit record data, but perhaps of summary aggregate data products. And we also think there'll be additional uses. For example, clinical quality registers may use linked data to a greater extent than they already do, and also clinical trials. So some clinical trials already do use linked data, but I think there's lots of opportunities, including in things like post-market surveillance. So just to finish by saying that the SURE infrastructure is actually essential for all of these health research futures. And finally, just some acknowledgement and thanks. Particular thanks to the Sachs Institute for continuing to host SURE. Thanks to the SURE team for providing a great service, and to all those SURE users whose research is helping to improve Australian lives. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Marion. A really excellent presentation and really interesting to reflect on the future. Hopefully we can come back to that a little bit more in the discussion at the end of this session about the pipeline of data that you referred to and the different types of users that are emerging, all really important issues for us to think through. So thanks for that, Marion. So we might hand over to Matt Gorringe next. So Matt, as I referred to earlier, is the director of SURE at the Sachs Institute, would probably be known to a number of you. He's got extensive experience in a range of areas. I won't go through them all, but survey research, data management, analysis, and management of large-scale operations itself. So Matt, over to you to talk us through SURE.
Thanks, Martin. I'll just share my screen, and thanks, Marion, for a great presentation. So I'd just like to begin by acknowledging the fact that SURE is funded by the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy through the PHRN, and it's also funded by the New South Wales Government. I want to give a little bit of background about the Sachs Institute and sort of the rationale for why we operate SURE. The Sachs Institute, as an evidence specialist, is an independent and not-for-profit organisation with at least 20 years of experience. We aim to bridge the gap between evidence and decision-making, and that's a particular niche that not a lot of organisations engage in, but is incredibly powerful if you can translate research into action. We have a huge range of programs that I'll talk about in a minute. We have an amazing sort of portfolio of insights and partnerships. And of course, we run the SURE because it's a critical enabler to support the use of linked health data in research. So some of the things that the Sachs Institute do is evidence reviews, which help frame the problem and find opportunities for research or further research. We develop and test scenarios, particularly with an amazing program of decision analytics and system modelling, which is just an amazing way of understanding complex systems. We design policy and program solutions and evaluation. And we measure the successes of programs through that evaluation. We also have data assets, including the SURE and the 45 and up study. So just a bit of background on the new capabilities in SURE and our current usage. Look, since inception, there's been 1,050 researchers and policy analysts who've used SURE. Most of our users tend to be academic researchers. Many are government policy analysts, and many are commercial consultancies working on behalf of government. At the moment, there's more than 650 users in SURE today, and there's more than 227 research projects ongoing. We have data placed with the SURE from more than 30 different data custodians, generally state and territory and Australian governments, but also many clinical registries and cohort studies. SURE's a national system by design. It's open access. It's designed to enable anyone who needs a secure place to store and collaborate to be able to come to and use SURE as a service. We have enabled many international collaborations in the past. The importance of that, I guess, is that the data in SURE stays in Australia. Users remotely log into the system, but we know where the data is here in North Ryde in Sydney at all times. It's now much more than just health data. There's a lot of human services data, which of course is used in health research. And as an example, of course, we have now tax records and social services data. Most of our studies are single-use bespoke data linkages. That is, they are sets that are created for a specific research question, but more and more, which is a great thing, I think we're seeing these enduring linked data assets or large-scale research collaborations that are being designed for long-term and high-impact work. The SURE Enhancement Project was the project that's delivered a lot of the improvements I'm about to talk about. It was funded by the PHRN through an NCRIS Research Infrastructure Investment Plan grant. We focused on two parts of anecdotal feedback that we get from users or did get from users regularly, and that was about the cost of SURE services and the ability of the computing power in SURE. We aimed in that project to extend the trusted governance standards and the independent provision of services. We wanted a more flexible and cost-effective use model for users. We wanted to support new capabilities in high-performance computing and artificial intelligence, particularly we were getting requests for using SURE for omics research and imaging research, which require a different quantum of computing. And we wanted to make sure that the platform was able to support these larger enduring assets and trusted user models of access. What did we deliver of real value? So we reduced our fees for some power computing options, and we reduced the setup fee for every user coming to SURE, which was great. We also provided a lot of new power computing options. We got new servers, and these are very modern, very well spec'd servers. So the CPUs are very competitive with things available elsewhere. We set up a secure sandbox for the release of synthetic data. This is a perennial problem in research, that many researchers can't see and play with the data before they have to submit an application. So there can be a lot of waiting involved, and the secure sandbox is designed to let custodians park synthetic data for people to access without lengthy approvals. We bought new GPUs alongside the CPUs, and they're now being used by 2 current research studies, which is great for imaging analysis and for pattern recognition in medications use. We implemented new file access logging, which is about giving custodians the confidence to employ trusted user models of access to data. And we also looked at the automatic upload of data from trusted data custodians. And I would encourage any data custodians here today to talk to us about whether you need an automatic upload. It's particularly relevant, again, for those large-scale collaborations. The virtual machine upgrades we made, the main thing we heard from users was flexibility. The need for episodic, non-linear use of computing power. So we made our virtual machines available for as little as a month. We reduced the fees for the virtual machines at the same time. The virtual machines we have sort of as standard on our menu are up to 128 gig of RAM and 16 CPUs, but importantly, we can offer up to 2 terabytes of RAM and 128 CPU cores in a Windows virtual machine, and we can offer more than that in Linux virtual machines. So there is no limit in a sense. I mean, that's an almost infinite limit. Please come and talk to us if you find that your virtual machine is running slowly or it's holding up your work or something's not working. We do have more solutions available. Of course, we removed the workspace setup fee, which was just fantastic and a really satisfying thing to be able to do, to remove that $2,000 fee. Our plan developments for the future, just briefly. We're doing a storage expansion at the moment. We're finding that omics and imaging projects, require a lot more data to be stored onshore. So we've ordered and are about to receive a brand new storage solution. We're making upgrades to the way the curated gateway works. And for most people, I hope you understand what that is, but the curated gateway is a way of governing the ingress and egress of data to and from shore. It provides a human review of every bit of data that comes into or out of shore, and it protects against the improper use of data being exported or imported to shore. Those improvements we're making are again focused around trusted use and models of access. Multiple curation means that we'll be able to have many different groups of curators, and this will help, I hope, data custodians to experiment with and support the devolution of those responsibilities to the chief investigators and the researchers as a trusted user. We'll deliver improved training, particularly on user behaviour expectations and some specific, I hope, modules on each data set so that the data sets can be described and so that researchers can understand the peculiarities of each data set. We're going to set up code repositories. I note that we're using GitLab in a number of studies in shore at the moment, and that's really, really useful for researchers. We'd like to expand the use of code repositories across shore workspaces rather than just within each research study. We're launching a quarterly application upgrade cycle so that users will be able to choose to have the latest version of their applications installed. And we're experimenting still and investigating, I'd rather say, secure cloud computing just for that, on-demand burst computing power. And of course, we're always focused on delivering best value to our users. Thank you. Thanks, Martin.
Thanks, Matt. I mean, I think it's interesting. A lot of you would have been involved in some of the consultation that went into the development of the shore enhancements that Matt just described. But I think the thing for us is that that's resulted in a lot more of diverse types of users coming into shore. So people that need different capabilities coming into shore and shore being able to handle those. And then we've also got this set of plan developments into the future that Matt started to describe there. And that at the moment has also been generated from a lot of the consultation that's gone on in the last couple of years. So we do have some questions that I keep referring to, some opportunities at the end of this discussion to hear from you all about areas that you think that we haven't addressed yet that you think do have value into the future. And very keen to hear that because we do have a planned program of work emerging here and we do want to make sure it's got high utility to all of our shore users. So we might move on to the next slide, the next presentation, sorry, which is starting to talk through some practical examples about how people have used SURE and what they see the benefits of SURE, particularly from, in this case, the research community. So I'll introduce Associate Professor Julian Corhi and Catherine Lang, who are both from the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute, to talk to us about the application of SURE in the registry of senior Australians. So over to you, Jill and Catherine.
Thanks very much. And hopefully you guys can see our screen now.
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic, thanks. So today we've got a bit of a duet by myself and Catherine Lang. I promise there'll be no Islands in the Stream, Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers duets going on. But first of all, I'll be sharing about ROSA, our infrastructure and our research highlights today. And then Catherine will be talking about the SURE requirements and a bit more technical details. And I just want to add, we'd be really pleased to be here today to share about our work that we're doing here at ROSA and how SURE's really facilitating ROSA's data infrastructure needs and our analytical capabilities. And I'd also just like to acknowledge the Kaurna land that we're meeting on here today, where Catherine and I are, and all the other lands where people might be meeting as well. So thank you. So a little bit of background about the Registry of Senior Australians, or ROSA as we refer to it. We're an Australian clinical quality registry and data platform that's designed to monitor and evaluate the health, service use, medication use, mortality and other key outcomes of older people receiving aged care services in Australia. We were established in 2017, led by a partnership of researchers, clinicians, aged care providers and consumer advocacy organisations, and this was set up with 13 different organisations. Importantly, we link data from health, aged care and social welfare sectors to provide a really comprehensive picture of people's ageing journeys. And our overall aim here at ROSA is to improve the quality of ageing and aged care service provided to older Australians. We started out as a team of 3, and over this really quite a short period of time, we've grown to about 25 of us. Importantly, we've got 4 PhD students, and as you can see from that list there, we really are a multidisciplinary team, which I think is one of the real strengths of our team here at ROSA. So just a bit of background about, what aged care is for those of you that sort of work in that space. And importantly, there's about 1.5 million recipients of aged care services in Australia. And as you can see from that pie chart, the majority of people will receive services to help them stay at home. 20% of people receive residential aged care. And almost 20% will receive home care packages. And increasingly with that, we're seeing, that ageing in place and people really wanting to age in place and stay at home, supported by family and community and these services that the government provide. In terms of residential aged care, there's 805 approved providers across Australia and 916 approved providers of home care packages in Australia. So this is what ROSA is essentially, and we've actually got 2 registries, if you like. We've got our historical cohort, which we've done most of our work to date on, which is a national cohort of between 2002 and 2020 of 3.5 million people that have ever received aged care services in Australia. And essentially this is our backbone to which we link our data to. Over time, we've evolved our data sources, and in the darker blue, there are original data sources that we've linked to the aged care data, which includes the National Death Index, the PBS data, the MDS data, and we have state hospitalisation data from 4 states, which represents about 84% capture. And we also have New South Wales and South Australian Ambulance Services data. In last year, we've just been able to link it to the Domino data set. And later this year or early next year, we're hoping to link ROSA with the Australian Immunisation Register and the Australian Rehabilitation Outcomes Centre data. We We also have a prospective cohort, which really is why the registry was set up, which is just for South Australia only. It's a prospective cohort where we actually have the identifying information of the providers, so we can provide targeted information to the providers in terms of quality and safety metrics, and I'll be sharing a little bit about that later. In order to have this amazing data resource that has these 17 data sources from 9 data custodians, we have 5 authorised data integration authorities, and we have 2 separate overarching research protocols. And as you can imagine, there is a lot of ethics and forms that needs to be done for this, and we've actually got a full-time ethics officer to facilitate with all of this. As you can see from this picture here, you can see that ROSA, since its inception, is evolving over time, and we really just wanted to highlight that in terms of increasing data platforms that we are linking to ROSA, and obviously in terms of size of ROSA is expanding quite considerably. And in pink are the ones that we're planning to highlight in the future. So it's continually updating our data to make sure our data sources are contemporary, but then also adding in those new data sources such as workforce performance data and the new aged care data that's available as well. As I said, there's a lot of ethics and data source approvals that's required to have access to all of these data sets. And the only reason, as Merryn highlighted, that we're only able to access all this data is that it is actually stored under this safe and secure platform of SURE. So just a little bit of highlights about ROSA to date. So we really are quite a relatively new research centre, but we really have had quite a significant impact in terms of our research outputs and ability to influence both policy and practice. As you can see there from the left-hand side, we have over 80 journal publications and multiple reports. And importantly, I really just want to highlight the amazing opportunity it was to contribute to the Royal Commission into aged care quality and safety. We contributed to 8 separate reports, and our quality and safety indicators, the metric system that we developed to monitor quality and safety, was also used extensively by the Royal Commission. Importantly, we have a lot of consumer engagement activities, and that just goes back to our establishment where we actually had end users involved right from the start of ROSA, including consumers and end users such as aged care providers involved in the establishment of ROSA. As I said, our outcome monitoring system, which is a way that we can actually use all this data that is existingly available, so it doesn't place any burden on aged care providers in terms of collecting additional data, is a means by which we can monitor the quality and safety of care that people, both in home care and residential aged care, can receive. As I mentioned, it was used for the Royal Commission in multiple reports, and in 2020 it was passed as a motion supporting the use for quality and safety monitoring in Australia. We've established a lot of wonderful collaborations. And I just want to highlight our collaboration with Wadley Paringa here at SAHMRI, which is our Aboriginal Health Research Unit, where we're actually looking at the quality and safety of care provided to older Aboriginal people in aged care as well. This just highlights some of the key sort of infrastructure and research areas that we focus on. And as you can see from all of these circles here, there really is quite a wide range and diverse areas that we're focusing our research on across aged care. So includes things like the quality and safety monitoring, which is obviously a key focus here at ROSA, to things like national infection control, quality of dementia care, hospitalisations, and primary and secondary health resource utilisation as well. So this just shows some of the highlights of some of our quality and safety monitoring work, publications there. A big one there was the one for the Royal Commission, where we actually did an international look at quality and safety monitoring around the world, and then also quality and safety indicators that we developed both for home care and residential aged care in Australia. And this is some of the work. That graph just shows the variation, some of the visualisation that we can do to show the variation in quality of care provided to people, in this instance in residential aged care. As I mentioned before, we've got a prospective cohort, which is why the registry was established, where we're able to provide targeted information about quality and safety care to aged care providers. In this instance, it's our residential aged care report that we're able to provide to providers in South Australia on 12 different indicators of quality and safety, and then also provide, as you can see just on that picture on the right-hand side, the ability to compare to the South Australian cohort, what it looks like in Australia overall, and then specific benchmarking to other providers, such as of similar location and ownership and size. Importantly, we provide a little bit of information about why it's important to monitor that indicator. We provide information for further resources to potentially improve the quality of that care. And hopefully moving to the future, this targeted information will be able to drive quality and safety improvements in both aged care and residential aged care. And importantly, I want to highlight that we also, because of the linked data sources that we have in ROSA, we're able to risk adjust. So we actually have these meaningful comparisons with like versus like. And now I'm going to hand over to Catherine to talk more about the technical aspects about ROSA and our datasets.
Hey everyone. So first I'm going to talk about the storage that we have of the ROSA datasets. So as Merryn was saying before, that there are billions of health records. Well, we have them. So we've got 3.5 million people in our aged care cohort. And because this goes over 10 years and we've got all of their MBS, PBS, Domino and hospital data, we've actually got 4.6 billion records in the ROSA, and this is growing as we keep adding more and more data sets and more time span as well. So as well as having the original copy of the data, we have to get clean data and derived data, and we keep storing all of those. And every time we get a new data update, that's a separate cut of data, so we need to keep both of them. And the end result of that is that we are just increasing our storage space that we have in Sure. So the little graph on the right there, we started off with 1 terabyte of storage, and now we're up to 3.6. And we've just been adding that in, I think, about 200 gigabyte chunks, which has been really helpful for us instead of having to pay for the whole lot all at once. In our team, we've now got 25 staff, and of those, we've got 18 Sure accounts, and they're sharing 15 of the virtual machines. So we've got a few people who are working part-time or who aren't doing analysis all the time, and they're able to share a computer between them and save some money there. We've got several different types of accounts that we have. So we have supervisor users, which is our director and our associate director, and they mostly want to look at what everyone's doing and not really do any of the analysis themselves, but still be able to see the data. We've got 4 power users who are statisticians, data scientists and postdocs who are using the big main ROSA data sets. And then we've got 12 regular users, which is postdocs and statisticians, and they're mostly doing analysis of smaller subsets of the data. Our team's also using a variety of different software programs. We've all got different expertise in the team. So we're using SAS, Data and R mostly. And each of these software programs, they also interact with the data and with the storage in different ways. So that's important for what I'll talk about next. We also have data custodian access from AHW, who has approved, I think, probably like 1,000 files that we've been pulling in and out of the Sure gateway, and also the state health departments who've been uploading data to Sure for us. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the RAM and the CPUs, which is like the difference between some of the different user accounts there. So the RAM is the working memory of the computer. And what the main thing that I'm not a computer scientist, but I think the main thing that it affects is how big a file that you can open. So usually you can't open a file that's larger than your RAM, and you also need room for the operating system to run as well. So it's maybe 4 gigabytes is about what you can open on an 8 gig of RAM. So the Shore standard users is an 8 gig, and the power users is a 16 gig. And I think that this is roughly equivalent to a normal versus a good laptop if you went to go buy one from Officeworks. Our MBS and PBS data sets are 250 gigabytes. So obviously you can't pull those into RAM unless you had lots and lots and lots of RAM. We've been storing ours just as flat files in 6 to 8 gig files. And that means that we can open it with the power user accounts. And then the analysis subsets that we have, they're usually for shorter time spans or for smaller than our cohort. And so those are usually a little bit smaller file, but they can still be up to several gigabytes as well. The maximum file size that you can open, as well as depending on the RAM, it depends on how the software or the code is using that. So often R is trying to read in the whole file, whereas SAS might decide to just read in the bits that are relevant, and it can open something a bit bigger that way. Also talk about the CPUs. So the CPUs is basically how well your computer can multitask. If you've got more CPUs, then you can split a big calculation so that each CPU is handling part of it, and that's parallel processing. I've got a little diagram there showing how that works. So SAS by default is doing a lot of parallel calculations in its basic procedures, things like the proc sort and also using SQL. But something like R, I think usually it needs some extra work to make it parallel. So you might need to put in different command, or you might need to put a function that parallelizes it. And probably the CPUs is more important when you start doing more complicated calculations on the same data. And this is something that we occasionally do, and this is when we would upgrade to the PowerX machine. So if we're doing things like latent class analysis, that was quite computationally intensive for us. I've just got a couple of graphs here that Max, who was previously in our ROSA team, has made. And this was part of the feedback that he sent for the Shore 2.0 upgrade of doing different tests of the RAM and the CPU, of trying to aggregate just a large data set. So the left-hand graph is showing with a RAM that's too small for a big file. So this was the 16 gig of RAM trying to aggregate a 9 gig file. Then that was really blowing out the computational time. And that was the main thing that mattered. Whereas the right-hand side is showing once you've got enough RAM, then increasing the RAM didn't really help so much more, but it was how many CPUs are working and how well those are being parallelized that was speeding things up. In summary, the ROSA's got a lot of different data infrastructure needs, a lot around the data security and having the large data sets. And we've been using the Sachs Institute's Shore environment for this, and it's been good.
No, fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
Great. And thank everybody that's helped make the ROSA possible. And thanks for listening. And here is our team. They're close.
Great.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Gillian and Catherine. Excellent presentation. Great to see such a fantastic data asset that you've created, and the detail that you provided on that is really fascinating. And probably like many people on this call, my mind's kind of racing on the possibilities. Like it's a very impressive asset that's been created, and great to hear how you've managed to manipulate that data and make it usable within the Shore environment, complemented by the functionality that's been enhanced. It's a fantastic story to tell. So we're going to move on now to another example of how Shore's been used recently. So Diane Watson, Dr. Diane Watson's from the Chief Executive of the Bureau of Health Information in New South Wales. Diane's got around 25 years of senior management experience across measuring, monitoring and reporting on the performance of healthcare systems. So over to you, Diane.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'd like to extend my thanks to Martin and to Matt for working with us at the Bureau of Health Information over the last year. to make data available for researchers to use to help support improvements in the New South Wales health system. And I noticed there's about 100 people online. So if I do my job right today, Martin, I'll have 100 new applications to use our data. So just go. There we are. So let me start by, of course, acknowledging traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting and pay respects to Aboriginal people, elders, past, present, and emerging, and those with us here today. If you go and spend a little bit of time on our website, which I will encourage you to do, because that's where you'll find all the information that you need to know about the kind of data assets that I'm talking about today that we'll be making available through SURE. The Bureau of Health Information is New South Wales statutory body, and we're the agency that publicly releases information on the performance of the healthcare system in New South Wales. In our strategic plan for we released earlier this year, there's two areas that I wanted to draw your attention to that really underlie some of the work that we will be doing with the Sachs Institute. One is to drive awareness and use of BHI's information, both the information that we calculate on performance of the healthcare system, as well as working and spending more time with researchers in terms of delivering higher value information to continue to inform healthcare professionals and the community about the New South Wales health system, opportunities to improve and where our strengths are. We are really focusing that on enhancing access to actionable insights. We'd like to do that in partnership and collaboration with the research community. We're enhancing data linkage and sharing agenda. Obviously, the sharing we'll be talking about today, and I'll touch also on the data linkage, because we have data that you can access that's not linked, that is very, very useful, but also linked data to be able to enhance our expansion and delivery of new information to people across New South Wales. If you look on our website, you'll see some of the core programs we have. I'll just spend a minute on the data portal, which is the images on the right, because I just didn't want to miss the opportunity to mention the volume of data that we have around hospitals and health services across New South Wales that don't even require that you go into SURE, and in my view is probably underutilized by the research community in terms of the potential of that data to inform, create new insights from advanced analytics. For example, on our website, we have now almost 14 years of information for more than probably 80 hospitals about quarterly performance in emergency departments, action within admitted patient care, elective surgery, all by urgency categories, types of surgeries, triage category, etc. That's spanning almost 12 to 14 years now, depending on the hospitals. And we also have almost 12 years of information now on approximately 80 of the largest hospitals around patients' experiences with care. Within each one of those survey data sets, there's probably around 50 to 60 questions. Every now and then, every couple of years, we go to the smallest facilities across New South Wales. So the total composition of the number of hospitals that are we approach people and have rigorous survey results around is probably about 120. So I want to spend some more time now then talking about what subsets of this we'll start to, and I have already started to make available through SURE. I'm going to focus particularly just to give you some expanded details about what's in there and available to you from the Adult Admitted Patient Survey and the Emergency Department Survey, but there are many other surveys that we run, and within those surveys we run special purpose modules just to give you a flavor of what's available. So first, I just want to talk a little bit about that survey program, just to let you know about what I would say is its international uniqueness, and therefore your access to internationally unique data in terms of the volume of completed surveys, the comprehensiveness of this program, the deliberative approaches to science, using science to create rigorous, robust, representative information right across so many hospitals in New South Wales. I've put a lot of details in the slideshow, only just to touch on here, but to make the slideshow available to you through Matt and the Sachs Institute's website. But you can also begin to understand the breadth of opportunities by spending some time on our website, which I'll show you how to do to fast track to do that in just a minute. But at the core of these patient experiences surveys that we are making available and already available through SURE, I just want to touch on the rigor of the survey questionnaire so you can start to understand the uniqueness, robustness of these self-reported experience and self-reported outcome measures from people who have experience at New South Wales health facilities. In terms of the questionnaires, we have more than 900,000 participants over the last 10 years in those surveys. Each of the questionnaires goes through robust survey development processes with literature review, cognitive testing, which we're running all the time, periodic reviews around the reliability of the question sets that we're using. We have evolving core question sets, relatively stable across time, evolving at the periphery as we learn more and more about reliability and predictive validity of some of the questions. We add in special purpose modules for priority topics, virtual care as an example, introduced in the last couple of years because of the pandemic. We have, in fact, from a literature review, we had commissioned from the Sachs Institute what we believe is probably the largest international collection of patient-reported experiences and outcomes with virtual care. Those patient-reported experiences and outcomes with across the questionnaires that we have vary in terms of their reflections on a care journey, their reflections on an acute episode of illness, and also depending on the sector of the survey, we may ask them about the reflections about their care experiences and journeys with look-back periods of either a month or 3 months or 12 months. In terms of the recruitment process, which you can find in our technical supplements on the BHI website for each one of those surveys. We use rigorous methods, obviously adopted from the academic community around mail outs and reminders. We still do mail invites because they're highly successful in our response rates, despite lots of tests we've done about alternative approaches that people think we should use. Mailing still absolutely underscores the high level of response rates we have. About 60% of people will respond by mail, 40% by online options that we obviously make available and push just because it is indeed cheaper, but we still use mail approach because of the impact that has on our response rates despite the costs, because we are very, very interested in robust and representative responses. Response rates still high, and international best practices around 25 to 40%, depending on the survey. We do calculations of all the survey weights, so that's all available. The sampling and oversampling strategy that we use to ensure annual estimates for at least hospital level across the largest 75 to 80 hospitals, quarterly estimates sampled deliberatively robust for the state and the LHD level. And then, as I mentioned earlier, every couple of years, we are in the field, as we did earlier this year, collecting for an additional 65 small rural facilities. Just some examples of the opportunities, just thinking back in the last year or two about additional modules we've added or additional oversampling strategies that we've used for our work here in government that is now available through SURE. Is over the last, every year, actually, just in those core surveys, we have about 20,000 admitted patient surveys completed, about 20,000 emergency department. We've added a module in July to September 2022 because of the pressure on ambulance and the growth and length of time, given what was happening in the healthcare system at that time, just to understand patients' experiences with ambulance care on the way to ED. From August to October 22, we did an oversample and a module for elective surgery patients to understand their experiences, particularly waiting for care, given the growth in wait lists that have occurred and accumulated over the pandemic. Earlier in 2023, we've done a sampling, as I mentioned, for an additional 60-odd hospitals, small hospitals around a rural emergency care. From 2021 right through to 2023, we've done numerous surveys to understand patients' experiences with virtual outpatient and our outpatients' experiences with GP care. And we've also been asking patients about their experiences with virtual care, outpatient GP after discharge from hospital. We've done oversampling for Aboriginal patients in 22, 23 for LHD estimates, but indeed we actually also did a census sample in 2019. And in 2020, we wanted to go to the research community, go and work with SURE to make all of that available. But unfortunately, we were into the pandemic and had to do things otherwise. But I really, really don't want people to underestimate the power of that census sample of the survey of Aboriginal patients that we did in 2019. We have done some important descriptive and evaluative work with that data, but is absolutely underutilized. And we are absolutely on an agenda this year to ensure optimal uptake and use of that data in particular. I just reflect back over the last 10 years. As I mentioned, we had about almost 90,000 completed surveys. We have at least, and not having gone through all of the different data sets, our estimations of at least 500,000 people have offered consent to link their experiences data with administrative data for the purposes of informing improvement in New South Wales. And we're here to help you create those collaborations, both to do your academic publications, but also ensure that that information is used to improve care in New South Wales. I won't touch much on that slide, just in the interest of time to try and capture some more time back for you, Martin. And I'll just touch very lightly on the next couple of slides then. We are very much on an agenda of working with the Saxt Institute to be able to make this available to researchers for all the reasons that others have talked about today. We've put together a list of high priority clinical and policy questions that I won't go through today, just in the interest of capturing up some time. But please do have a chat with us if you want to know more about that. I just wanted to put in one slide essentially what I would think if I had 100 applications today. We didn't want necessarily 100 calls. So we do want 100 calls, but what we want you to do first is have a look on our website. If you go into the patient survey program, you will see all of those surveys that we have used over the last 12 years, all of them. Every change to them, every module that's in them, etc. Once you have gone in there and had a look either at the inpatients or outpatients or small hospitals or large hospitals or ED, start to have a look at those questionnaires and you'll start to find the modules. And in fact, many of those special purpose modules, especially the ones more recently since we've been ramping up the volume of them during the pandemic, they're all listed on the website. You want even more details about the recruitment process, the response rates, the number of participants. They're there for every single one of those surveys in what's called a technical supplement. You can also play around to understand early relationships between self-reported and experiences and by patient types of cohorts, be it Aboriginal people, CALD community, by age, etc. You can do a good screen from our data portal. Get in contact with us because you might have a great idea and went to one data set and found what you want, but we might tell you about 2 or 3 other alternative data sets or additional data sets to be able to give you a nice rich portfolio to potentially even put together a program of research rather than a particular project. And then we'll work with you to help finalize kind of a data request and access protocols. Then the last thing I would say, and I'll leave it, as I mentioned, these slides with Matt, is we went about doing just a pilot project on the data linkage. I picked a topic that I thought would be great for New South Wales, And given the literature, I kind of estimated that we would have an effect between better patient experiences and outcomes. And why I wanted to present on it today is not only did we find something that we've seen in a couple of other international publications, but the magnitude of effect in New South Wales was absolutely phenomenal. And this article has been an absolute hit in New South Wales, and it provides a nice example of what can be done to illustrate the power of these data. So we put 3 years of data together to look at a small cohort so that we had thousands of people who had congestive heart failure or COPD. We looked at their survey on their experiences while they were in hospital, and we used the administrative data to track their readmissions to look at what is the strength of and what's the nature of the relationship between experiences of care and outcomes, only to find that those had better experiences were twice as likely to have lower readmission rates. And let me show you exactly what that looks like. And I think most importantly, with the power of the data that we have, given the statewide sampling that we do for the principal and first purpose of reporting on our hospitals, and the second purpose, because the volume is so high, we have enough kind of fidelity to look at the moderating improvements in care and what kind of effects do you have for levels of improvement. And we put this slide together because I just absolutely love it. One of the things that's really, really important to reduce readmissions is open and clear and effective communications with patients, particularly patients with complex conditions and chronic conditions. So here's the effect that we've measured in New South Wales. If you have COPD, you're admitted to hospital, and we ask you, did healthcare professional explain things in a way that you could understand? And you say no, your readmission rate is 33%, adjusted for all other determinants of readmission. If you said yes, sometimes they explain things in a way that you would understand, your readmission rate goes down to 20%. And if you said yes, they always explain things in a way you could understand, your readmission rate is 15% after accounting for other determinants of readmissions. So we published that last year. And in the last year, we've worked with our very first researchers who've gone end to end with us around accessing the data, using it for their research questions. They, with us, started on those first questions of self-reported experiences, relationship to outcomes, and they've submitted publications now, have done presentations, and they indeed are seeing similar findings around the magnitude of the impact of proper medication counseling for those who have first medications, and the quality and customization of food services on patient experiences and self-reported outcomes. So thanks for your early interest. We would love to have a further conversation with you. Matt will have the presentation if you want some of the more details that I skimmed over. But as I said, if I've done my job right today, we hope to have 100 of you come and visit us and to be using our data to help inform and improve care in New South Wales. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Diane. And really amazing set of opportunities there with the data sets that you've been through. I think we're all keen to make sure that they're liberalised for health research more generally. So if people are interested in any of those data sets, certainly do get in touch with BHI, or the Sachs Institute is also part of that process, obviously through SURE. And for any of the policymakers on the line as well, of course, we're interested in making different government data assets available through SURE in a similar way than Diane's just described. So we'd be happy to talk to you about that as well. So because our time's getting a bit away from us, I might ask Hannah to make sure she posts the questions in the Q&A section in the next little while so people can start to engage with those and answer them while we also hear from Fleur. So I'd just like to introduce Fleur, who is currently the acting group head of the Data Strategies and Discovery Group at the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. Apologies, Fleur, but I can't do justice to pronouncing your surname, so you might have to kick us off with the right pronunciation. But Fleur's going to talk to us about SURE data governance.
Thanks very much, Martin. And yeah, for those of you who struggle with my surname, that's nearly always 100% of people who don't know me. My name is Fleur de Crepigny, and like Martin said, I'm head of the Data Strategies and Discovery Group at the Institute, and it's my group that's responsible for all our data linkage work that we do at the Institute. Now, I'll just share my screen. There we go. Hopefully you can see that, but I just wanted to, thank Martin and Matt for the opportunity to talk to you today about the AHW's role in data linkage and how we meet our obligations with respect to providing access to sensitive health-related data in partnership with the Sachs Institute and SURE. I just thought I'd begin by giving you a brief overview of the AHW in case there's anyone in the audience who's not familiar with what we do. So the AHW is an independent statutory agency whose main function is to produce authoritative information and statistics on the health and welfare of Australians. And we do this through the production of reports and through making data available in a variety of ways to researchers, service providers and the community more generally. And as you'll hear about more shortly, we also provide important data linkage services to both government and non-government researchers. So the AHW holds a really broad range of data, and data linkage is an increasingly important tool for unlocking the benefit of our data holdings. Linked person-level data have the capacity to provide more nuanced insights into pathways through health services and to evaluate what does and doesn't work in terms of clinical practice, policy and programs. Among other things, with linked data, we can fill in information gaps in individual data collections, or we can do things like better determine the prevalence of disease. And Merryn mentioned NISI in her presentation, and so what we are doing at the Institute is trying to make linked data available in a more streamlined manner for researchers, and also work towards bringing together a broader range of health and welfare and aged care related data on an enduring basis, which should simplify the ways, simplify the process of getting access to linked data into the future. So the AHW's data linkage services are delivered through its Data Integration Services Centre, or DISC as we call it. And DISC is an accredited integrating authority, which is actually now, I should say, an accredited data services provider under the data scheme. And we have the authority to link Commonwealth government data with other data. Under our Act, which is the AIHW Act, we're able to provide researchers with secure access to data and information on health and welfare topics. And the DISC completes about 90 linkage projects a year, as well as a very large number of data egress or clearance requests, which I believe are nearly all down to Rosa, where we check the privacy and confidentiality requirements in relation to the public release of data are met. So our DISC services can support researchers through end-to-end project delivery, from providing advice on projects' technical and legal feasibility to providing support to researchers through the ethics and data custodian approval process, and to facilitating safe access and outputs through SURE. AHW staff and researchers are obliged to comply with 4 main sets of obligations when sharing and accessing data. The first of these is the AIHW Act, which defines our purpose and functions, but the Privacy Act and the Australian Privacy Principles, and these govern the use of personal information. We also have to comply with the wishes of our data suppliers, and we also have standards that are set by AHW with respect to the safe use of data. So under the AIHW Act, the AHW can only receive data where its use contributes to the functions of the Institute, and all use of data is subject to Ethics Committee oversight, and conditions imposed by the committee are legally binding. Section 29 of our Act establishes strict confidentiality requirements, which prohibit the release of data concerning a person unless specific exceptions apply. And the AHW has to exercise care not to reveal the identity of individuals or organisations, including data suppliers, and also take care not to reveal whether a person or organisation is in fact included within a set of data. So all AHW staff sign a Section 29 undertaking as part of their employment, and all researchers who access AHW are also required to sign this undertaking. The Privacy Act and the 13 Australian Privacy Principles, or APPs, have an important influence on how we collect, use and disclose personal data. Both acts, though, recognise that the data are recognise the importance of data being made available for the purposes of research that benefits the community. Now, the Institute's subject to all the APPs, but some are of particular relevance to the activities of the Institute in terms of data linkage and sharing of data. So APP 3 places pretty strict obligations on the Institute regarding our collection of data that includes personal information. APP 6 requires that for the AHW to use or disclose personal information that we hold, we need to either have consent from that individual or there needs to be an authorised by law exception, such as a Section 95 waiver. APP 8 requires steps to be taken before personal information can be transferred to an overseas entity, and APP 11 requires us to take reasonable steps to protect personal information from misuse, interference or loss, and also unauthorised access, modification or disclosure. So these are some of the things that we need to take into account when we are making data available to researchers. I mentioned the data supply requirements earlier. So AHW's data suppliers often attach conditions to the use of their data. And these conditions might include things like suppression and reporting rules, requiring specific approvals to be in place for the use of their data, or the use of a secure access environment. So AHW must ensure that the requirements of the AHW and the Privacy Acts are met while balancing sort of the competing needs of researchers. And we try and aim for an appropriate balance of data utility and complexity whilst ensuring we maintain compliance with all the legal requirements and data custodian requirements. So really, in other words, we're aiming to share and release useful, legal and safe data while minimising the cost to researchers of their provision. So SURE supports AHW's operations as an ADSP and our obligations under legislation and the Australian Privacy Principles. And use of a secure environment like SURE allows the AHW to meet Commonwealth data custodian requirements in providing access to sensitive unit record data. And so this slide really shows the range of data that can be shared within SURE. And we currently we've got 83 active workspaces that are using AHW data in SURE and nearly 300 researchers or analysts accessing data. The AHW's MOU with the Sachs Institute in relation to SURE provides the underpinnings of all governance of data and their use in SURE, and it supports our operations as an ADSP. The security of SURE really gives us confidence that we're compliant with APP 11 and can reasonably prevent unauthorised access, modification or disclosure of data. And importantly, in doing this, SURE meets ISO standards. It can control and audit researcher data access. And data access is not going to be provided unless researchers supply a raft of approval documentation to support their eligibility to access data. Our compliance with APP 8 is maintained with SURE's onshore storage of data and the prohibition of access to researchers who are overseas. And a key issue for us in relation to this particular APP is the application of Australian law in other jurisdictions. So if we had a breach, we wouldn't be able to prosecute somebody who is based overseas or when the data were overseas. The external curated gateway allows the AHW to ensure that de-identification requirements of data suppliers, such as small cell counts, suppression and things like that are applied. And the researcher training ensures responsiveness to breach management, really ensures that we're all working together effectively to meet all our data sharing obligations. I'd just like to conclude with a few reflections on the success of the partnership between the AHW and the Sachs Institute in relation to SURE. We have a really strong working relationship, which I think is absolutely essential at a time when the data landscape's evolving so rapidly. There's increased demand for access to data, but there are also increasing risks in relation to cybersecurity and privacy breaches. We collaborate very closely in relation to the functionality of SURE to ensure that Commonwealth data can be both shared and protected in state-of-the-art ways, and also so that researchers are really clear on their obligations in relation to accessing data. And I'd just like to close by drawing your attention to the work the Sachs Institute has undertaken with SURE users to develop the observation deck. And this initiative really supports collaboration within teams while maintaining privacy. It reduces the amount of data that needs to leave the environment, which is great, protects privacy. It minimises data egress workloads, which is excellent for the AHW, and it enables everyone to work in a really productive manner. So, yeah, thank you everybody for listening. I'd particularly like to thank some of my staff, Brian Collier and Natalie Cooper, as well as Matt for their contributions to this presentation, and also just draw your attention to where you can find more information about the Institute's data linkage work on the Institute webpage. So thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks very much, Fleur. Fantastic presentation. Great to see that detail around the AHW's legislative basis and the governance model that you're operating within. It's a fantastic insight. I really appreciate that. So we were going to move to the discussion part of the session today next, and Merrin's kindly agreed to be somewhat of a guinea pig against some of the questions that we have for you all. But just a reminder that in the Q&A, you'll see the three questions we're most interested in hearing from everyone about. And if you do have some comments, some perspectives, some insights against those questions, it would be really appreciated if you're able to respond to those in the Q&A section. But I might kick us off by asking Merrin a couple of her perspectives on these questions as we move through this part of the discussion. So the first one's about the big health challenges. And I guess I'm curious, Merrin, given the PHRN hat that you're wearing and the collaborations that you have with the other parts of the research infrastructure across the country, where you see the big opportunities for data linkage researchers to take on a stronger leadership role in generating the evidence base for action. Where do you see those opportunities?
Well, I think you're right that the Australian health system has challenges like health systems around the world. Some of the challenges, it seems to me, are health related. So we have sort of broad blocks of health conditions that cause ill health and create disability. So things like cancer, cardiovascular disease, and then the big raft of chronic diseases, reduce quality years of life for populations. And we've seen something from Rosa about the disability and others as well. I think that's sort of important. That's not to say rare diseases aren't important, but those diseases cause heaps of challenges around the health system to individuals and across the population as a whole. Then I think there's a different lens. There's another sort of challenge, which is actually at the health system level. And I think what Diane's presentation sort of highlighted, where research can actually deliver information that can change an outcome for a patient or a group of patients. Sometimes that can be specific at the level of a procedure. I'm conscious of something that PHRN data was used for, which was doing heart surgery in octogenarians, and people thought, oh, maybe grandma's a bit old to have this, but actually the research said that under certain circumstances it's actually fine, and people had good quality years of life after the procedure. So for particular procedures, but then at the more generic level, as Diane said, it's maybe as simple as just finding out whether a person really understood what was being told to them. And if they didn't, there was a high risk of readmission. So there's sort of a block of things around, I guess it's around evidence-based care and about translation. And I think that there's great opportunities there, and linked data is sort of fundamentally important. And probably last but not least, I think it's around sort of connecting more health data. Linked data is really powerful for the sorts of data that it covers. But we mentioned earlier, I mentioned the NCRIS Health Group, and we're trying to sort of connect things from the molecular to the population so that we can bring in the omics data, because that's fundamentally important, particularly for things like rare diseases. So that's just a few thoughts. And I'm looking in the Q&A because I can see that on my screen, and I can't see a lot of comments or other questions. And so, as Martin said, we encourage the audience just to add something there, or let us get a sense of what you think about the challenges that Australia faces.
Yeah, it'd be great to get that insight, and perhaps we can circulate the questions to the group after this session as well if people are having difficulties accessing the Q&A function. But maybe we'll move on to the next question, Miriam, which you started to speak to a bit at the end of that, the answer to the first one about the sorts of technologies that are now emerging that are going to have a greater role in the health services generally, but in health services research in particular. So because we are in this period of rapid technological change, I mean, people are always talking about being in that period, but it feels to be really the case at the moment that technology is changing very quickly. And I'd be curious, again, in your role as sort of chief executive of the PHRN, what sort of new technologies you see emerging that might have a role in generating new evidence, in using new sorts of data? Where are those opportunities going to emerge, do you think?
Well, I think we're clear that this is all about big data, and we've seen it. Rose has given us some nice figures there about the size of the various data sets we're talking about. And when you've got big data, I think probably a current issue, and an issue that's going to be around in the short to medium term at least, is around AI and machine learning. So these are gigantic data sets, and they're probably bigger than the human brain can really capture, despite all its great statistical software. And to apply sort of the machine learning algorithms to big data sets, I think will give us whole new insights. We know that things like AI can help diagnose negative outcomes in premature babies far quicker than the clinicians can see the changes in the clinical presentation or in the biochemistry. So there's a whole set of things, sort of patterns for a neonate that can predict its outcome hours earlier than would be otherwise known, and that then clinicians can respond and health outcomes can be much better. So probably the big thing for me is AI and ML. And I think there's been a lot in the public domain about the issues and the risks and how we should really manage it. And I have to confess, that's not my area of expertise. So I think there definitely are issues. There are certainly issues in health information, coming back to the point we've talked about before around what we do needs to be lawful and ethical and acceptable. So I think it's probably watch that space. And I think it's maybe something the linked data community, there are probably people within our community that have greater knowledge about what the options are and how, where there are opportunities and also where the challenges are.
Yeah, thanks, Maren. And then, I mean, I think you've also started to speak to the last question, which is what sort of capabilities we need to have in our system to ensure that we can navigate both access to and use of sensitive data. And you started to talk then about, compliance with the legal requirements, but also ethical use of this data set. So do you have any reflections on the sorts of capabilities you think might be needed moving forward?
Well, just in a short answer, I think we need teams with lots of different skills, and within those teams we definitely need data scientists. And I think the interest in data science is growing, and universities and other higher education facilities are attracting people into data science. So I think that's good. But in all of this, we need to remember that the landscape around the The legal side of things is complex. Fleur, you've highlighted some of those dimensions. There's within each jurisdiction, there's privacy legislation, there's health records legislation, and while these are similar, they're not identical. So there's actually, I think it's important for the data linkage community to have within the various teams some what we call ELSI, ethics, legal and social implications expertise, and that's certainly something PHRN has, that expertise, and we'd really like to expand that because we think there's a demand. I think the data linkage community has a pretty good understanding, but I think some of the omics and the imaging and other communities probably would benefit from a little bit more input.
No, really interesting point there at the end. I agree. So thanks for being the guinea pig here, Marion. Much appreciated. And it looks like we've got a collection of comments coming through in the Q&A and perhaps some in the chat as well. So I think, Matt, we'd also intend to circulate these questions to the people that participated today so they get the opportunity to contribute, even if it's not right now, but over the next couple of days. So I might hand back to you, Matt, for a summary and a close.
Thanks very much, Martin, and thank you to all the presenters and people attending. I think it was fantastic to hear about the PHRN's support for data linkage units and secure research environments. Apologies, Sod's Law says that as soon as I turn my mic on, someone will start hammering on the floor beneath me, but I'll press on. I learned a lot about ROSA today, and we've been hosting ROSA for some time. It's amazing to think about the amount of work involved in establishing such a large data platform, and it was fantastic to hear about the impact on the aged care quality indicators that were developed from ROSA. So thank you to Jill and Catherine. Thank you to Diane. Amazing information available, particularly the unique patient experience and outcomes measures in the BHI survey collections. Just, touching on, I wasn't aware of the availability of the Aboriginal admitted patients data, so that's something really significant that I learnt today. And great example of the relationship between experience and outcomes, and the mind boggles at the potential impact of information like that, and of what impact might be realised by having other researchers come and use the Bureau of Health Information's data. And a great overview, thank you, Fleur, of the legal basis under which so much data is shared with researchers from the AHW. It's a great reminder of the value of the release of that data to researchers, but also of the really important the importance of data governance and the legal basis of it, and the fact that it is something that's established under the AHW Act, and for which there are very tight requirements that need to be met. So we're really happy, of course, to be partnering with you to make that data available for researchers. So yes, I'm sorry the Q&A function didn't work initially for some people. It seems to be working now. I think the way to engage with those questions is, if possible, to do so inside Teams, either through the chat function in this meeting, as soon as we finish the meeting, or if you do have the Q&A function available, to keep posting there. So thank you. Martin, would you like to close the meeting, or shall I?
You can proceed, Matt. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, look, I'll declare the meeting closed, and thank you everyone for attending and presenting. Great to see you all, and thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Matt. Thank you.